Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this is a video on practicing web design. Now, as a web developer, a lot of times, my job isn't to necessarily come up with the design. The design has generally already been designed by some UX developer, etc. But I may have the job of implementing the design. So one of the most important things, if you're on more on the development side than the design side, is practicing how to implement designs, being able to find a design and be able to replicate it using your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. On top of, especially if you're a front-end developer, I'm more of a back-end developer, but you always want to be sharpening your skills on the full stack. So one really good strategy here is this website Behance I just learned about recently from a friend. And basically, this site you can find visual stuff. And one thing you can do is you can look up web design. And you can find kind of all these sorts of mock-ups, visual representations of a possible website. And you can use these to sit there and say, hey, let me try to see if I can do something like that. Okay, so for example, let's see here. Let's try something like so. It doesn't, and again, the idea is you don't have to necessarily make it exact, but the idea is we take a look at it and we start assessing like what's going on here. So I'm thinking, okay, so basically we have this large hero div here. This hero div here, and that's going to have like a background picture of these flowers, and essentially this is just some text that's overlaid. So basically here we have another row. So within the div container we have this row, which is like the navigation and the logo, and which it looks like, since they have X elements, they just kind of have it all evenly spaced out. So I can imagine that this is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 divs inside of a flex container that are evenly spaced out, etc. And like what you do is you just think about it in squares. So this is one big row, and then inside that row there's a row within the row, and then this is essentially another, and basically this is the other row. This looks like it's just probably like a div with an absolute position, or an SVG shape that's just kind of layered on top of these things with some drop shadows. And again, this image may not have necessarily been made, more than likely not made with like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's a mock-up done in like Sketch or Figma or Adobe Illustrator or Adobe Photoshop to inspire, to recreate. So let's try like recreating something like this. I'm not going to use the exact same images and all this stuff, but let's try to get this kind of a design. So the idea being like at least this top hero image. Okay, so basically a picture with some text over the picture for the navigation. Kind of text effect. Let's see if we can do that. Okay, and this is like a good way to practice. You may not get it perfectly, but the idea is like you have a visual to kind of latch onto. So like I'll go in here. Again, this is just going to be a purely CSS JavaScript, CSS HTML type deal. So we'll call this practice one. So what I'll do is I'm going to create. First thing I'm going to do is just kind of sketch out the HTML. So index.html. And then I'm going to put in also create a style.css. Okay. So first thing I do is I'm going to use Emmet to set up my boilerplate. Let me link in my link tag, link, link CSS. And that's good. Always kind of defaults to style.css, which is perfect. So that's all connected. So when I think about that website, I'm going to think that there's the header. So I'm going to use a header tag. That's going to represent, if I go back here, that's going to represent this block right here, this whole block with the picture of the flowers. Okay, and then I'm going to want another row or another block to represent this navigation. So I'm actually going to use a nav tag. Let's use, keeps it semantic. So this nav tag, and this nav tag is going to have, we'll kind of keep it with like 5 elements. So we're going to say a logo, 4 menu items, and this little shopping cart icon. So I'm going to create a div with, I'm using Emmet, so a div with the class of logo. Okay, and we'll just call this logo. Okay, and then we're going to have a div with the class of item. Okay, we'll just say item, and we're just going to create, was it 3 of those, 4 of those, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. 4 of those. Okay, and then we're gonna have one that's like the icon. Div dot icon. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that emoji to represent the icon. So let's see here, UTF-8 emojis. Full emoji list. Find something useful. Let's see here. Emojis. Let's go back down the list. Let's see here. Is there like a shopping cart emoji? There probably is. I just don't have necessarily. We're not gonna sit here and like look through every emoji. So I'm gonna stop in a second, and we'll just take what we find. Okay, a calendar's fine. We'll just use this calendar emoji. Okay, so I'm gonna copy that and just put that right here. And there you go. So because emojis are UTF-8, and again we're using the UTF-8 character set there, so we have access to all the emojis. So I'm gonna stop there. Okay, so first I'm gonna just try to get this look in the way that I want it to look. So cool. So I'm gonna go into my header tag, or go into my styles, and let me just go look up a good background picture. So let's see here, images.google.com. We'll just look up like hero background image. Let's find like a decent one that would do the trick. Generally what I want is just kind of like a solid picture towards the top for that navigation bar. Okay, this is kind of cool. I kind of like this. Let's just copy that URL. Copy image address. So I'm going to say that I want the header, and generally I'm going to want this to have, so background image. Okay, and I think I want to do that. Okay, and then I want to give it like a fixed width, and this is not happy with something, so let me just check here at rule or selector expected. Okay. Can't believe it. Sometimes things just escape your mind. Using a background image CSS, because I know you have to pass in that URL. There we go, URL. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, URL. There we go. Okay, good. It's happy now. Okay. And let me just make sure. Do I need quotations? Yes, I do. So let's use quotations. Okay. So I'm going to pass that in as the background image. I want this header to be height. We'll start off with 500 pixels and see how that looks. Okay, because the idea is that, you know, it's not, because the background image is going to fill in the thing, but the div itself is not going to necessarily extend itself to the height of the image. So in that case, we have to kind of set like a fixed height or something. There's different ways we can do that, but that's the way I'm going to do it today. So now let's take a look at the file so far. I'm going to right click here and open with live server. Okay, so then we see there, and we see like again this stuff is all going to be kind of stacked on top of each other. We'll come back to that. Do I want to make that bigger? Yeah, let's make that a little bit bigger. Let's make it 800. And let's actually do this. Let's make it, let's try 60 viewport height. So whatever the viewport height. Okay, maybe a little bit more than that. Let's try 80% of the viewport height. There we go. Okay. Now what we want to do is take care of that nav bar. Okay, that's inside the nav, and that should have a display of flex, so that way all that stuff goes inside of a row. So okay, so you see now this stuff is inside of a row, and I'm going to do justify content. I want it to kind of all be evenly spread out, so we'll do space around, and see that kind of spreads it across there, but we're going to want to make it bigger. Okay, so I'll just do the font size from here. Font size. Actually, no, I'm gonna do it for the individual items. I think that's good for there for now. Let's give it a little bit of margin, actually, or padding. Give it like 10 pixels, so that way it's just not nestled up against the the top of the screen. Okay, and now we'll do those things inside the nav, which have a class of logo. So we'll do the logo. So nav.logo. Okay. And what I want this to do is have a font size of, let's say, 2 EMs, a color, something light, so the contrast against the black. So we'll say violet. And we want it bold to give it more of that logo look. Bold. So font weight. So we'll just choose the heaviest boldness. And I want it to have a different font. So font family. I'm just going to choose something random. Cambria, why not? And let's see how that's looking. So there's our logo. Okay. And now we do nav dot, I think it was menu item. So let's take a look. Item, just item. Okay, nav dot item. Okay. Now these, I do want them to still be a little bit bigger. So we're going to say font size. Not quite as big as a logo. So we're going to say nav 1.5 EMs. Now I want them to be all uppercase. So text transform uppercase. Let's see how that's looking. Oh, I still can't see them because of color. And we're going to say that color is white. Okay, so we see item, item, item. Okay, I don't like this little white border here, so I want to fix that. And that's going to be with the header. So I want the header to have margin of 0. That should kind of nestle it up a little bit more. Let's do margin 0, padding 0. Might even be the body, so I might have to go to the body. This is where like a reset becomes really nice, where you get one of those like CSS reset, like normalize. So body, margin 0, padding 0. Let's see if we get rid of that. There we go. Got rid of that white space. That's better. Okay, I still want these items to be a little bit more less against the top, so I am going to increase the padding here. So let's try to increase this by 20. Let's see what that does. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. Cool. Okay. So we're seeing that kind of effect. If we go back to our inspiration image. Okay, so we see like there's the picture, and then we have like the menu on top. And then we just do the icon. Nav.icon. And we just want to make that a little bit bigger. So font size 1.5 EMs. And that should make this a bit bigger. And there you go. You see like you have that little icon there for, let's say, a calendar. I mean, again, like something from like Font Awesome icon would probably look a lot better. But again, this is just a quick demonstration. Okay, cool. So we got that. So the next thing is to kind of have like this, see like this sort of div here that's kind of off to the side. So let me try and think, what's the way that I'd like to do this? I could use absolute positioning, but I could also take advantage of flexbox. So what I can do is I can make another div below the row, put one div inside of it, and then we can try to position it from there. Let's try that out. Okay, now in this case, I'm probably going to want to put some sort of like background color because it's going to be kind of hard to read the text over this otherwise. So let's first scope that out. So again, now I'm working on the next row, still within my header because the header is what has the background picture. So in this case, we're going to do another div. Don't want to call that div. Yeah, we'll call that div. Okay. And this div is going to have inside of it another div. We'll call this div dot hero text. And then I want it to be like that, div dot hero text. There we go. And then we'll just say some text. We'll put a couple of things in here. H1 some text. H2 a subtitle. And 3 a button. A button. Okay, so right now that's going to show up like, see, like showing up right over here, not in the most aesthetic place in the world. Okay, so here is what we will do. Let's go style this. First thing I want to do is style. It's going to be header, but I don't want any div under header. I want specifically that div that's right below it. So I'm going to say I want that div. Again, this would be easier if I just gave everything its own class, and it'll also be more semantic, but I'm kind of just doing this pretty quickly, so not being as deliberate as I normally would be if I were just taking my time. Header div, I want that header to be a flex box. Display flex, and I'm going to justify content flex end, so that way it's off to the side. Then we'll use kind of margin to kind of push it off. And justify, and then align items to also center that way. So we'll see we got it kind of there. And then in this case, I want to give the height of this 100%. I want it to fill up the rest of the area. So there we go. Okay, so right now it's off the distance over here. We'll improve the spacing. And then we have header div, or I can just be like header, and what's the class we gave it? Hero text. So hero text that's inside the header. Okay. What do I want? Let's give it a background color. And I'm going to want to use RGBA. Okay. Let's see, let me think, what color do I want? Let's use like this kind of red there. And this is the background color for the text. So I want, yeah, I want it to be white actually. But then I want it, well, let's do this. I will copy that. And then I will do this. There we go. And then I want the alpha to be like 0.8. I want to have a little bit of transparency. Okay, so you see how it's like it's a little bit transparent. But again, that location's still kind of not great. So what I want to do is give this a margin, and then this is going to be a margin to the right. So margin from the right, let's give it like a 30% margin from the right. See, that pushes it from the right to there. And then we'll give it a little bit of margin bottom. Margin bottom, and then we'll give that like 20%. I just want to push it up a little bit. It's probably too much, but you can always, oh yeah, that's too much. So let's give it, let's make it 10%. How does that look? Yeah, that's kind of in the right spot. Now I do want this box to be a bit larger, so we'll say, well, we'll give it a little rounded corner, so border radius, so that way it looks a little bit nicer, 6 pixels, and we'll give it some padding of 40 pixels. Okay, so that's starting to look a little bit nicer. You can probably make it a little bit more transparent. So let me go back over here, and let's make this 0.7. Let's see how that goes. We can go a little bit more. 0.6. Okay, there we're starting to lose the contrast a little bit, so let's go back to 0.7 or 0.65 maybe. Okay, that's probably pushing it. Let's go back to 0.8, 0.7 I mean. Okay, we'll work on it a little bit more in a second. Okay, so now let's do dot hero text, the H1 that's in there. Okay, we want to text align that center. And what I want to do is text transform. I think that's already all caps anyways. Yeah. Let's change the font family. Font family. Css Sans. Let's change the color of the font. Let's make it a nice kind of. We'll go with brown. Why not? Okay. Again, not quite the effect as nice of the effect as I would have liked, but you're kind of seeing like the concept, the basic idea of like, okay, hey, we're placing this text over here. Like if this space over here were just more of like a solid black or more solidish color, this might. But we can also do some effects on the background image itself. I don't know if you can do that if it's a background image. But cool. Now let's see here. I mean, I could put like another div on top of it, but that's getting a little complicated now. Okay. Then we have this text over here. We'll give it some more text to make it look more. So I'll just use lorem ipsum. Lorem. There we go. Okay, and see, like now that pushes it too much, so I need to go back and rethink my margin here. So margin right. Let's make this 10% now. And that's all fine and good, but it's just that text is taking up. We should just give this a fixed width then. Width 500 pixels. There we go. Now in that case, I probably should go back to the 30% margin here. Okay, nice. Again, a little hard to read there, so I'm gonna jack up this opacity again. Maybe 0.9. I guess. What I may want to do is give that a border. Border 10 pixels dotted black. I'm not sure, that'll probably look tacky, but we'll go with it. Yeah, that looks tacky. Let's use a solid line. Yeah, that kind of makes it stand out a little bit more, makes it kind of like a little less abrupt, the existence of that. Although we can move it over to the side a little bit. So let's make this 25. Yeah, that's kind of turning into something. Okay, now let's just make that button nice and fancy. Let's take a look at kind of how they did with the button. Okay, so the button was just kind of like translucent. So in that case, we'll say, so we'll do dot hero or header or dot hero text. Is hero text a div or, yeah, hero text is the div. Good. Dot hero text button. And we'll just say background color none. Border color, we'll say also 6 pixels solid black. We're going to say that the font size here is a little bit bigger, so 1.3 EMs. Padding going to give some space to that button. So we'll say 20 pixels. Let's see how that's coming out so far. Okay, we're getting there. Again, I'm not using fancy fonts, so that kind of... So again, we'll just use some random font there. Looking a little bit better. We also kind of want to center this button. That did not center the button. So in that case, what I will do, I will change the display of the button to a block. And then I will just use margin auto to center it, because I don't want to center the text. So that's cool. There we go. Now you have a button, but see, like when I click on the button, I don't there's no like feedback to show that this button is clickable. Okay, so maybe what I want to do is make the button like have this sort of like effect that it's clickable. So I could just do this dot hero text dot button. Okay, and then do a hover on it. And I could just say, hey, when you hover over the button, the background color becomes black and the color of the text becomes white. And this would kind of work. Yeah, see, like that. But it would be nice if that was like a little bit of a smoother transition. So I can use a transition property. Transition. Then I'm going to say, hey, the properties I want the transition. I want color to transition for 2 seconds or less 0.2 seconds. And I want the background color property to transition for 0.2 seconds. Okay. And now so basically what it does, if those properties change, it'll phase them out over that period of time. So like, see now it's like it's a little bit smoother. It's not quite as abrupt. It's like a little bit more of it kind of eases in. Okay. I could make it longer. So let's make it like, actually, let's make it like 0.8 seconds. So that way it's a little bit more visible how long it's taking. Okay, it's probably too long. It's a little, yeah. That's why I usually do the 0.2 or 0.3 seconds. But see, now I can click this button. Doesn't do anything right now, but you kind of get the idea. So we kind of replicated this effect. Again, ideally, like this section of our hero image would have been more plain. So that way I wouldn't have to create that like white block that's kind of making this kind of ugly, but you're getting the idea of sort of the approach to positioning the items. You can always tinker around with the colors, thinking around with the spacing, but the idea is that the more you take a look at something like to inspire you as far as like the placement of things and sort of the approach. So again, in this case, building the nav on top of the picture, the more you get. And so in that case, then I would go build out the next row, and you would just kind of go on and start trying to rebuild each section. I always just think of it as like rows. So this is like row 1. This is like row 2. This is a separate row, this whole list of products there. This is another row. And I would just kind of go down one by one and keep rebuilding each row until I'm done with the mock-up. But the idea is that even if you're not creating the exact same thing, following sort of the general methodology of where things are placed and how things relate to each other. In this case, like, hey, that top area is all solid color, so I'm building colors that contrast with that to build the nav. And then I'm putting this text over here around here off to the left. And again, I don't think right now the way I wrote this is too responsive. Let's check it out. So if I change this to that, like that's not a cool look. But let's see, let's put this on a phone. Yeah, so like right now I didn't really do anything like particularly responsive. But I don't think if I go to like iPad, it's like horrible. But yeah, there's a lot more work to be done, but we're already at 30 minutes. I just kind of want to give you the idea of like, okay, how do you approach practicing your design skills? Okay, again, you would spend a lot longer and be a lot more deliberate, but the idea is that you find a mock-up, you find an image, and you do your best to like follow, either try to recreate it identically, or you can just try to just follow the general pattern of it. Again, just try to follow like where the things are at and how they relate to each other, and adapt it. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.